President Conference, we're facing an ideological onslaught on state education, an attack on a system that has taken 150 years to develop, a system that will be destroyed and may take generations to restore unless this short but very planned destructive journey is stopped. The Academies Act 2010 was a major piece of legislation, rushed through Parliament with such haste that its parallels lie in powers reserved for emergencies. In fact, it was only the powers reserved for emergency legislation that allowed it to progress without the vital scrutiny to which it was entitled. The contempt shown by the coalition government in railroading through this act is only matched by the individual contempt shown to communities and teachers as individual governing bodies make decisions in secret that will radically change their community school into one of potentially 22,000 businesses funded by the state but totally out of local democratic control. Not only did this act provide the stepping stone to quickly convert schools into privately run academies, it is there to encourage groups, including zealot parents, to set up new schools in areas where quite often there are and there were already surplus places. The disused office block, the room above the chip shop, have become the reality of the situation in the quest to break up state education as we know it. Any claim that this is about localism and community empowerment beggars belief. Far from embracing these concepts, it's an encouragement to megalomania for those head teachers who regard schools as their fiefdoms, a precursor to education for profit and a deliberately calculated assault on a national state education system. A system that has shown year-on-year improvement in standards delivered by a workforce whose conditions of service are nationally negotiated and agreed. A system managed locally through democratically accountable local authorities, whose economies of scale harness and share expertise and good practice, support and enable school staff to focus on raising standards. Colleagues, we vehemently oppose the Labour Academies, an experiment in education provision that failed to demonstrate that standards would be improved by taking schools out of the community. We witnessed those academies widening their catchment, effectively selecting their intake to the detriment of neighbouring schools. However, the Labour academies were designed to be part of a solution where schools were judged to be underperforming. Make no mistake, these converter academies are not the same creature. They are far, far worse. They are designed to be the total solution. They form a piece of the ideological jigsaw that sneers at public services, denigrates the work of local councils, and instead puts the business model of locally unaccountable private enterprise on a pedestal to the detriment of our pupils, students, and young people. Such is the fear of any proper argument or challenge to conversion. School governors are encouraged, led by heads who have been perhaps mesmerised by the captains of their ship metaphor, much promoted by the then Shadow Secretary of State prior to the May 2010 election, to move quickly to their new freedom and status without consultation with all or even any of the stakeholders. What price community cohesion? Instead, we have a system that will encourage divisions and create educational segregation as pupils are increasingly denied access to the local schools. The dangling of a delusional financial carrot is often used to spur on governors to make rapid decisions at hastily called meetings. Wild claims that schools will retain thousands, hundreds of thousands, even into pound signs in 7 figures if they break from local authority control and swim on their own. It's a delusion, colleagues. What happens when the school burns down? What happens when pension liabilities for support staff are finally calculated? And what happens when one of these business units schools goes bankrupt. I don't need to spell it out. But as parents, as grandparents, we deserve a lot better for our children. And you, as teachers, deserve a lot better. No longer will you be protected by the national pay and conditions of service. No longer will you have the trade union recognition rights that you accepted as the norm. Why? Well, freedom is not about improving your pay and conditions. It's about the freedom to operate in a context where you are a disposable asset. Unlike, of course, the highly valuable disposable asset of the land around a school. Remember, apparently, there's nothing wrong with a school making a profit. Colleagues, we are fighting now to protect your interests. And loud and clear, I tell you, NASUWT will continue to fight to protect you, irrespective of the status of your school. At a time when the continual mantra is to reduce expenditure, this is the most expensive model ever dreamt up. It runs counter to all the arguments regarding economies of scale for procurement. But colleagues, this is not what it's about. It's far more sinister. Look no further than the Education Bill, now in progress, where the Secretary of State seizes over 50 new powers. In the rush to get through the Academies Bill, there was a failure to cover everything this government wanted. Now the I's are to be dotted, the T's are to be crossed. Academies and free schools will have no restriction on charges they can make for anything beyond the core curriculum, as yet in itself to be defined. But the signs are it will be very narrow. No wonder David Cameron said there was no intention to bring back grammar schools. Here we have selection by social division. Schools can be handed over to private companies by the Secretary of State, and academies and free schools can sell off assets, including land, if the Secretary of State does not object. To their shame, many local authorities, instead of fighting to preserve community education, appear to have thrown in the towel. They talk of families of schools as though academies and free schools that are now claiming their independence will want to cuddle up to the local authorities, whose help and support they dismiss as mere financial strangulation. Who will these academies and free schools turn to for services? Private companies are queuing up to support the same companies that have been offering startlingly wrong and damaging advice as consultants, the very consultants who were eager to turn performance in management into a punitive process that would speed unwanted teachers into capability and dismissal. I'll say it again. Who said there is nothing wrong in education making a profit? You heard it here last year. Colleagues, we must fight this outrage. We must take a principled stand and embrace all our allies. The materials produced by NASUWT to help you fight are second to none. We must involve communities, ensure they demand answers to the many questions about finance and viability.
Can you finish off, Brian, please?
Colleagues, I move not only support this motion, but fight against this onslaught on state education.